it's a form of social Darwinism. The more white you are, the more advanced right you are, and the darker you are, the more inadequate. And I think we talked about, I'm not sure if we talked about it in our last conversation, but you look at how important race was during Britain's kind of colonization of India. When Britain goes to India, there's a lot of resistance from ordinary Indians. What's going on here? We don't agree with this. Just like anywhere, anyone comes to your home and imposes their way, you're going to be upset with it. I mean, you see the hoo-ha with, Sharia law and immigration here, or what European immigrants might be bringing to the UK. You see it today. I mean, imagine it back then when it was a foreign thing. When they go, they realise this resistance, and they realise they need to find a way to solve this issue of resistance. So what they basically do is they start to produce knowledge and disseminate knowledge to affirm the white man's burden, and also to get troops from back home to go there in the first place. That we as the civilized world, you may have heard that many times, the civilized world associating that or connotating that with being white. And they were producing some of maybe you can edit it out and put it in the podcast, the pictures of the Pears soap adverts in India of a baby, a brown baby or a black baby, being unhappy and sad at being black, and then using this British Pears soap where his skin has now gone white where he's used it, and now he's a happy baby. This was used during that period, and this Pears soap adverts, they're everywhere. And it said in the text, I can't remember it word for word, but it's things like, we're brightening the dark corners of the globe. From that moment, from Britain's colonization of India and other parts of, obviously, the African continent, you saw this knowledge appear. And you have to debunk all knowledge. You have to always seek to decolonize and really think, how do I know what I know? And where has it come from, and how true is it? And I'll come back to the cigarette adverts as well in this country at one point. When that came out, there was then an association with being fair-skinned. I mean, as a Kurdish person, you're fair-skinned. You probably get a lot of extra love just because you're fair-skinned, because being fair-skinned is associated with having a very, very bright future, being beautiful. And I remember when my own sister was born, my granddad was absolutely over the moon. He was quite a dark-skinned person. I didn't know what was going on. I thought, this is quite weird. He's not given this level of love. I was born quite fair-skinned, but I hadn't seen the love he'd given to me. So when I saw it with my sister, and some of the stuff that he'd say, and even his own life decisions to marry my grandma, based on that, having fairer skin, it started a knowledge and a knowledge that continued to kind of spread, that the whiter you are, the more successful you're going to be in life. And even the white person or the fairer skinned person being more trusted. And this is the legacy that remains today, to the point where you have bleach being used in those parts of the world. But it's also a form of domination. And I remember I was at One Young World. I was kind of seeing all of the power, the different backgrounds of the world. So you got 200 nation states representatives there, and you see the power in every race and every peoples and populations. And one of the things was, I then kind of reflected with a few friends from back home who had been to similar kind of conferences. I just started to say, why do we not live in a world where we view everyone's value as equal? And one of my friends shared a story of, they went into a room, and they described that when they went into the room, and this is a very educated individual, when they went into the room, and it's a room of all equally important people, when they went into the room, they immediately gravitated towards the white person in the room, and also took more from the little snippets that they said in that room, in this important meeting, than the other counterparts. And they only started to kind of debunk that and decipher what had happened in that moment and deconstruct it to realize that we have biases of value through these disseminations of knowledge that we've had in the way we look at the world and people and the knowledge that we value. Of course, critical theory changed that. My book is a critical perspective on the Iraq War that the majority of the guys from Washington or London weren't touching upon. But the more I engage with critical theory, I realize that, wow, knowledge production and these political systems that we have continue to produce the same orders because the lens is cyclical. It will produce what it knows until we ask those questions and we highlight these things.
That's a very interesting point. And it becomes a socially constructed unconscious bias.
Yeah.
And you're right, in many countries all over the world, they do still bleach their skin. They do still think the Western powers are, how do you put it, superior. That's what China's trying to kind of debunk by sending their students all over the world to do well, having that soft power. So in geopolitics, you have that hard power and that soft power. Hard power is troops on the ground and soft power is ideology and how you spread it. So America being number one, America winning the race to the moon, all of these things kind of highlight America as being the greatest nation in the world. And whether or not it isn't the debate for this podcast. And it's also the media, the idea that American media is the most powerful media. It does seem like the type of, for good or for worse, the type of social changes that come out of America then fuel everyone else. So a good example of that would be critical race theory, which I'm pretty sure came out of America, right? It would be all of the riots against police brutality, which did exist in other countries, but really have been spearheaded by American campaigners for decades now, as recently as the issues with George Floyd. Going back to your experiences with foreigners that you've met that weren't from the UK, were they all like this? Were they all definitely Western-centric and did think that the Westerners were better than themselves even? Because here we have it, but like you said, we also have it through education. So the Western curriculum in the UK has often been criticised for being, for, what's that line? J. Cole actually says this, they whiten out their own lies or their own crimes.
Yeah.
We know that about England, but the foreigners that you meet that aren't from England, do they feel the same way?
That aren't from England?
Yes.